Welcome to Beyond the Bell, Leading with Purpose, a Lifted sponsored podcast designed to encourage and support leaders by sharing real stories and real strategies that make a difference. In today's episode, we wrestle with some big questions. How do you turn a portrait of a graduate into daily practice? How do you build future-ready systems without losing people? And how do you lead sustained change without burning out? Our guest, Dr. Travis Bracht, Superintendent of the Affton School District and Missouri's 2026 Superintendent of the Year, shares how Affton moved from vision to action through community-driven portrait of a graduate work, competency-based learning, and an intentional focus on staff and student well-being. If you're a leader trying to align vision, culture, and results, this conversation is for you.
Welcome to Beyond the Bell, Leading with Purpose, a Lifted sponsored podcast designed to bring encouragement and support to leaders by giving light to the stories and experiences of leaders who are demonstrating leadership in action and making a positive impact every day. Jim, things have been going well here. It's almost Thanksgiving, and really just trying to take that time with the full house of kids and family and think about the things I can be grateful for this week and this season and previous seasons. But what's going on in your world right now?
Yeah, well, I got the opportunity to come down and visit Renee's family here in Mississippi, and the Florida crew flew in or drove in last night, got here, so get to spend the next couple of days with grandbabies, and looking forward to that. So again, like you, grateful for just the opportunity to see them, and really, it's been a while since Renee's been able to come down and spend Thanksgiving with her mom and her family down here. So grateful she's getting that opportunity.
Good stuff. When Jim and I founded Lifted, our goal was to help leaders grow through sustained support and deep development. The Beyond the Bell podcast was born out of that same heart, to share stories, insights, and leadership practices that help others build strong teams, strong systems, and strong schools. I'm very excited today. We are honored to have Dr. Travis Bracht, Superintendent of the Affton School District and the 2026 Missouri Superintendent of the Year. Dr. Bracht has been recognized for connecting visionary leadership with practical execution, leading work that fosters academic excellence while nurturing the emotional and social health of students and staff. Just a few highlights that I found on Dr. Bracht: led Affton through 2 strategic planning cycles, and they were centered on well-being, agency, and academic excellence, something near and dear to our hearts as well. Guiding the district's move toward a competency-based model anchored in student agency and lifelong learning, led the development and implementation of Affton's Portrait of a Graduate, a community-driven vision defining the skills and disposition a student needs to thrive, helped launch STL CAPS, connecting students with high-demand industries through real-world learning, passed Proposition 1 in 2025 with 80% support, securing $30 million in facility improvements, reflecting deep community trust. I met Dr. Bracht in the SRSN network, and I'm not surprised at all at the different accolades and the leadership that I saw there and how that's transferred to Affton. He's known statewide for innovative, transparent communication, including his weekly video updates and the Affton Unplugged podcast. He was also recognized as a 2022 Superintendent to Watch and 2023 Most Administrator of the Year. A graduate of the Master Superintendent Academy, AASA National Superintendent Certification, and the Caseville SEL Fellows Program. So, Travis, welcome to the show. I know there was a lot there to introduce you. I'm sure there's more, but if you want to take us a minute and introduce yourself and your district, we would love to hear it.
Yeah, well, thanks for that introduction. I was almost wondering who you were talking about, but I guess that was me. So I appreciate that. Very humbled by that introduction. And I know we're headed into Thanksgiving. And so first and foremost, I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to serve as the superintendent of the Affton School District. So this is my 8th year as superintendent, 14th year in the school district. And again, you don't take those things for granted. It takes a lot of trust. takes a lot of folks believing in you to execute those things, and I never take that for granted. And certainly, in Thanksgiving, we think about family, but also a chance to reflect professionally on how fortunate you are to do the work that you do, and specifically here in Affton. This is my 28th year in education. So I started as a high school science teacher, 1998, Hazelwood Central High School, and then also worked a decade in Francis Howell as teacher administrator before making my way to Affton. And so Affton, I think, is a district of about 2,600 students, pre-K through 12. We have a standalone early childhood center, and then we also have 4 schools. We don't have any schools that overlap grade levels. So we have an elementary that serves K through 2, another one that serves 3 through 5, middle school 6 through 8, and then a high school 9 through 12. And so really gives you that tight knit feel, as you might expect, because every child is going to go through all of your schools. And so families know that they'll get a chance to work with all of our staff, all of our administrators as they complete their journey here through Afton. So I think that really comes through in a lot of things that we do, is that tight knit community here in Afton. And again, very fortunate, very proud to be part of that.
I love
Okay.
that setup that they all get to go through each of the schools. So there's consistency in that. Yeah, that's awesome. I think, Nathan, if as you were reading the bio there, if he'd have hired us, I think we could have worked for him. I mean, that you talk about a parallel belief system right there. That's good stuff.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that I think for sure, and I think that's why we're so honored to have Dr. Bracht and bring light to some of that work, and how that was accomplished, and what the leadership traits and strategies that went into that can be shared with others. And so each show we try to highlight some sort of work that's meaningful to different leaders out there. And one of the things that we go so many different ways in Afton, but one of the things that I know actually I've used in the past is the process that you guys did with your portrait of a grad work, and that work has been shared with throughout the state. And so, what I wonder is what inspired Afton to begin the portrait of a graduate work, and what did your community identify as most essential for your graduates? And you can talk anything you want there.
Okay. Well, in 2021-22 school year, that's when we were designing our next strategic plan. And so, and I take that back. I guess it was the 2020-2021 school year. And I know that's a school year a lot of people want to forget. And so we did our engagement process of getting input on our strategic plan, primarily just like this, through Zoom. And so it was a very different way to do your strategic plan, but we got a chance to do maybe a lot more focus groups because people could log in. And so I was really proud that we didn't press pause. We wanted to keep moving forward with getting good input on our strategic plan. And so we launched that in 2022. I think one of the things that you have to always understand in education, you have to be adaptable. So that process of building the strategic plan took a little bit longer than normally does, because we were navigating a pandemic as well as trying to move work forward. So I always think it's important to get things done right. It has to feel right. It has to feel like this is your community strategic plan. And if it takes a little bit longer than maybe you thought, go ahead and take that time and get it right. But how does that connect to Portrait of a Graduate? Once we got our strategic plan set, we designed 1-year action plans. And so instead of a plan that lives for 5 years and maybe you lose track of what you've accomplished or what still needs to be accomplished, we wanted to take it in 1-year action plan chunks. And creating a Portrait of a Graduate was one of those first action steps. So as we wanted to make tangible progress, that was where that fell, is that we knew that we really weren't able to do that concurrently while we were building our strategic plan. But once we got it set, we wanted to go through that Portrait of a Graduate process right away. And so that was one of our key action steps to execute.
Oh, very nice. So, As far as the if you were talking to other leaders about getting their portrait of a graduate completed or I mean, I guess even, why would someone do that work?
Yeah, I think it really brings together things that all of your staff members can contribute to. So often it's so easy to, help explain to people how the job you do is so different and so unique compared to what other folks do in the district. And a lot of times that is true. A lot of different skills, a lot of different tasks. But is there an overarching thread that can hold your work together, whether you're a preschool teacher, teaching advanced placement courses in the high school? Is there any way that you can come together on how does this look like for the students that are in front of me, given their age, given their needs? And I think that's really what hits home with a portrait of a graduate is how are we working together? And it's unique to your district. So even though lots of districts have a portrait of a graduate, I don't know that I've ever seen two that are exactly the same. So that's the signature that you get to put on it. And kind of going back to making sure that when you have a big task like creating a strategic plan, you know, do it right. And if it takes a little bit longer than you thought, go ahead and take that. With our portrait of a graduate, as I think all of us in education, we like to think we can just do things ourselves. Why would we need help with something like a portrait of a graduate? So we kind of set out we were gonna do it ourselves. We're like, we can do this. We don't really need any help or we don't need folks to assist us. And so we kind of started down that process. And then we got hooked into what I think was a better system where we need some assistance. We need to be able to be participants, not just facilitators. So we need to be able to let someone else facilitate while we are kind of right in the thick of things with our staff, our students, and our parents so that we're really able to take in that process instead of being so concerned with just leading it and worrying about whether everything's going to go right. So that's something that I would point out is that always be willing to adapt. And even though you can do a lot of things yourself, don't hesitate to ask for help and get that assistance because this is something that's going to endure for a long time and you want it to be done well.
That's good.
Yeah, I want to follow up just because as you talk through that, you were in Affton even before being a superintendent, but you've been there 8 years, so you're probably there 5 or 6 when you were going through this process. Was there anything that surprised you when the community, everybody pitched in and came up with what the portrait of a grad was? And the reason I ask that is because I know there are superintendents out there. My first superintendency was in a small district, not too far from where I lived, but the culture was different, obviously. I couldn't have gone in there and expected to know what their portrait of a grad would be. My last superintendency was the hometown where I grew up and played, and my family had lived there forever. I had a pretty good understanding after 40 plus years of what the community believed in. So I'm curious if there were any surprises in your situation and any advice for somebody that's going into a place they've never been. They have no foundational understanding. What advice would you give them?
I think definitely set up a process where you can uncover things collectively while also uncovering things separately. And what I mean by that is it's nice to get a committee that has parents, teachers, community members, and students together. And I think that's very valuable. But also don't underestimate working with those groups separately. And so let's really hone in on what our parents are saying that could be subtly different but then a lot the same as our staff. Likewise, what are our students saying that there's some commonalities with our staff and our parents, but maybe there's just a little bit of difference. And I think having those groups work together, but then also spending time with them separately so that you can really hear what they're saying. And I think that's what really came through is we have 6 competencies. I would say 3 to 4 of them were pretty much common throughout all of the groups. But then you did hone in on that one competency that maybe was rather unique to kids and it didn't necessarily surface as much with parents and staff, but you want to honor that. And once you tell staff and parents about that, they're on board. They're like, that is so on point that if that's what students came up with, it was a little bit different. We need to honor that. Just like there might have been something that was slightly different with staff, that we want to honor that as well. So I think that's something that stuck out to me in this process that, you had to uncover that.
Yeah.
Maybe 50% of it didn't surprise you. Like I think we could have figured that out without a committee or without input. But then it's the other 50% that you're pleasantly surprised because you don't know what the answer is until
Mhm.
you go through the process, and then you uncover parts of that answer in ways that I think are very validating.
Yeah, and you probably remove your bias when you do that because
Yeah.
we all have our own lens that we see through. And yeah, good stuff.
So, how do you ensure, I mean, to make sure that the portrait doesn't become something that's just we check it off the list because someone said it was a good idea, or it's
Yeah.
just a poster, but it stays active in classrooms, culture, and your student experience? How do you ensure that that's part of the process?
One of the first things we did, we really have tried to focus on a big focus of our current strategic plan. Uh, I would characterize it as people first. And so we wanted everything about the plan to sound like we know there are people behind that part of the strategic plan. So instead of maybe just saying academic achievement, we're like, no, what are the things we do for our students? Our students are an important part of our plan. And so, yes, academic achievement, social, emotional, all of those things, we do that, but it's because it's for the students. And same way with our staff members, we could have just called it human resource management or something like that. But we view everyone as being part of our team. So that pillar is our team. That means you work for the district, you're on the team. So how do we really put that forward? And an extension of that is how are we being intentional about recognitions, gratitude, and appreciation? And so we've really tried to figure out how are those ways that we can recognize, we can appreciate, we can show gratitude, but then does that align with either the mission, vision, core values, and then the portrait of a graduate is an extension of that. How are we recognizing individuals based upon these portrait of a graduate competencies? And so we had always had monthly student of the month recognitions. We call it hashtag Affton Strong Student of the Month. And those had typically been connected to our district core values. We decided to pivot and ask staff members, think about where you see these portrait of a graduate competencies being displayed. Look at those, and then whenever you see a student who might be exhibiting things like adaptability, creativity, global citizenship, communication, critical thinking, empathy, let's make that a recognition. And so that was really a way to ensure that it wasn't just something that check it off the list, it's done, it's a poster, and really, it didn't impact our work. How does it impact our work at least monthly when we pause to celebrate students? So I would just say that's the first way that we wanted to make sure it got integrated is with recognizing students and staff noticed that they were exhibiting those competencies.
Mm. So it kind of becomes another one of those things. What gets celebrated gets replicated, and then it becomes part of the culture and the system, right?
Exactly. And our student recognitions had always been focused on trying to find those things, the students that are quietly doing what we want all students to do. We've already got celebrations that are worked in for things that get a lot of publicity. So there's things that are very much in the public eye, and we still do those. But how can we find those students that are they're just every day, they're just doing something because they knew it was the right thing to do. They weren't trying to earn a recognition. They weren't trying to be noticed, but our staff members saw that And that's how you really reinforce how can we help use that as a model and highlight that it doesn't have to be something that everyone sees and that is in the newspaper and it already gets a lot of publicity. We have a ton of kids that are quietly doing the right thing. And how do we move that forward? And we do want to publicize that. So not only do they do recognitions at the school level, but every month we invite those students and those parents to our Board of Education meeting. And so we read what it is that that student did that exhibited empathy or adaptability, and so they get recognized at our board meeting so that it can be publicly celebrated about what they did, even though it was probably a small moment during the school day that led to that recognition. We can really spotlight that narrative so that it helps people see that this is just one example, but there's a lot of great things going on in the school district. And we already have kids, even some of our youngest learners already are exhibiting what it means to be empathetic or adaptable, things of that nature.
It's good stuff. Um, you mentioned adaptability, and you mentioned you kept going in the perseverance. So, it's still early to tell, but you're kind of on the other side of this, and I'm wondering what would you tell those thinking about taking this on, and what outcomes have you seen, and what makes it worth it, where you do have the perseverance and the adaptability to, we're going to keep going with this work. And so I'm curious what you've seen as how you would talk to others about that.
Yeah, and Nathan, can I tie in because I'm also curious the competency based and the SRSN because I think that's a good segue because there is still that culture out there that is about A's and B's and tests and the map test. So as you persevered through the portrait of a grad, also tie in some of your SRSN work and how you're getting your community, your board to adapt to that new thinking on learning.
I love that question because something that I didn't mention in the process and why you have to be just smart enough to let other people do the work that they're good at because you get a benefit from that. And so working with folks who help districts with Portrait of a Graduate, they really prime the pump for future focused. And so a lot of times you know what your current status is and you know kind of how to be successful in that current environment. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, when do you get parents, teachers, kids together and really set a mindset of we want to set competencies that will prepare us for what's next 10 years, next 20 years. And I think it gives you that lens of, certainly we could look behind and look at the past and try to figure out what has served us well. Some of that will probably continue to serve us well, but how do you really get people thinking about the future? And that's the connection I'll make to the Success Ready Student Network is it's really working on kind of those next iterations of how would we more, do a better job at assessing students, being accountable for that, and then also putting that into an accreditation system. So I think the Portrait of a Graduate process really helps you think about the future and what kids really need. And is there a way to have, an assessment system that kind of validates these skills like adaptability, creativity, empathy, while also having traditional academics. We can still have that, we can still do all of those things that seem to have served us pretty well, but we also need to look at that through the lens of what our kids need for the future.
I think one of the things I've found challenging is people think those two things are mutually exclusive. And they're really not because if you engage in the right kind of teaching and learning, the other things are going to come. It's not like you're abandoning teaching. You're just giving them context. You're giving them experiences, and so those that want to separate the two, I think, struggle to see how they meld together.
Well, along those lines of the work with SRSN and the portrait and the competency base, I'm curious what shifts in teacher practice and supports did they need to have or have you given to ensure that again that's part of their classroom or those pieces?
I would say that in Afton, one of the reasons we got involved with the Success Ready Student Network, one of the reasons we were one of 20 districts to apply for that innovation waiver is that we knew where we wanted to go. We weren't there. We certainly were not a district that you would come visit and say, show me all of the competency-based things that you have in place, but we knew that's where we wanted to go. We wanted to be future focused. We knew that we needed to move in that direction. So our mindset was that I don't think we're thrilled with our current system of evaluating students and their competencies. So how can we be part of changing that? However, engaging with the Success Ready Student Network really nudged us into using practices like proficiency scales, where if you don't have anything else, or if you don't have a mental model other than add the points up, and then it gives you the A, B, or C, how do you change? You have to, show folks, you have to get them professional development. And so that's what we've really been focused on is here's a tool, here's a way of doing things, a process of evaluating what students know that is very easy for people to comprehend, but it is a change in practice. And so really honing in on proficiency scales is the work we're currently doing. And I would say, I don't know that we would be doing that if we hadn't pursued being a part of the Success Ready Student Network, learning from other districts, and really thinking about that shift doesn't happen overnight because you pass a policy or because you put in a handbook that, we're doing things differently. Your practice almost has to change first. And then when it becomes obvious that we're doing things and we need to now change the system. I think that's really what we were trying to help our teachers feel supported, so that really best case scenario, they're telling you we have to make some changes. Our practice has shifted. Now we need your help with changing some of the structures. I think that's has really been our approach is that we need the teachers to feel confident enough that what we're currently doing, the system we have doesn't really match that. So now we need your assistance to maybe move in a different place with grades, things like that.
Yeah, gosh, there's so many different ways to go here. Whether it's the way that you I'm going to throw some different things out there, but the way that you continuously cast a vision out there that's meaningful to people that they want to be a part of, or being a part of the network. And I remember sometimes people think there's this sense as superintendents and districts that we're in competition with the district next to us and or throughout the state in this ranking system. And yet really like we love kids, whether they're from Affton or whether they're from the districts that surround us.
Yeah.
And so being in that together and joining a network to say this is meaningful work and it's not about competing with each other, it's about learning with each other and getting the most out of that, so we can collectively be better and learn from others as well. And then I think also you've been in Afton a long time, and I can't help but this is just a guess, but I bet I'm right. Is there's a lot of challenges in education, some specific to Missouri, probably some specific to your area there, and yet I bet they're not nearly some of the challenges because of the strategic way and the vision that you cast. And I think about even teacher retention as an example, and um, how that may still be an issue for you, but that may be something like, well, we don't deal with that as much because of the work that we're doing. And so just as some examples, I don't know, I spit a lot out there. I don't know if you had thoughts or
Well,
anything
yeah,
there.
let me piggyback on that because I'm curious. One of the things we often try to get on these is just advice for young leaders, as well as we do. We've got a lot of young, new superintendents across the state. So to that point, teacher retention, culture, staff well-being.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your leadership strategies and styles that create that positive culture.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that you have to look at your entire system as every single thing is related and it also needs a plan for improvement. I think so often you get focused on student achievement is the only thing, that's the only thing that matters. So that's what our strategic plan is. It's only about students and how they're going to learn better. But you got to remember, you have lots of staff members in your district. What are we doing to help them get better, feel valued? You've got lots of departments in your district. You've got a finance department, probably. You've got a building and grounds department. You've got a human resources department. What are they doing to get better? Do they have a plan to get better? And how are they measuring that? And so it may start very focused on students and student outcomes, and that is certainly kind of the core of what we do. However, everything is so related. So we have really tried to lean into how does our strategic plan set up success for all of those areas? Knowing that, yes, all of the reason we have facilities, the reason we have a human resource department, the reason we have a budget is to do things for students. And they need to understand that. And that's why in improve and as they're trying to improve, they know they have to be supporting those things that we're trying to do for kids. And I think that's really what I would, advice I would give is that that doesn't happen overnight. But you also have to have folks that are willing to work on those things even when you're not around. So you've got leaders in all of those areas, even if their title is not one that you would associate with, oh, that's the head of the department. No matter what your title is, no matter what position you have in the district, you're charged with leading something. You're leading something on a daily basis. And so how can they do that with that continuous improvement or that lens of we have direction, we know what we're trying to improve, and so they're really help you get those results. And I think that feeds into, as you mentioned, you're trying to build that culture of improvement, culture of celebrating things that we accomplish. And ultimately, yeah, that does help people. Maybe I want to stay in this district. Maybe I want to work here because of some of those things you do. And I think that's what you're trying to build is reasons to stay, reasons for people to want to come when you do have an opening. And that has to come through right out of the gate. So if someone wants to join your district, the first interaction they have with your district, you have to either ask a question or you have to put something in front of them that relates to your strategic plan and how we do things. And so right away they have to get a feel for that's a good question. That's a great question because it speaks to kind of what you value, whether that's your portrait of a graduate, your core values, mission, vision. Right out of the gate, you have to give that impression so that they can also figure out whether that's going to be a right fit for them. More times than not, it's very validating to people. That's why I might want to work here. That's why I want to apply is because I already am getting a sense that they're asking questions or they're putting things in front of me that I think this is why I was curious about working there.
Well, I'm going to guess that people want to come to Affton.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we are, we're no different than a lot of districts. There are some positions where there's not a lot of folks out there, but I do think we're trying to maximize that and making a go of it pretty well. And so those are also things that as you think about your strategic plan, you got to have metrics that you look at to kind of see whether you're doing better than the average. Are you under the average? Do you have areas for improvement? And so we definitely do, try to take a look at teacher retention. And that's very important because, like I said, the applicant pool is shrinking. It's not what it used to be. And so now more than ever, you need to try to retain that staff that you have. But yeah, we are fortunate that when we do have openings, knock on wood, we've been pretty successful at trying to encourage people to come work here.
Very good. Well, and real quick, Dr. Brock is a superintendent. I don't think it's any different, regardless of what level of leadership you're at. If you're the head of your department or a building, some of the same strategies and values are transferable. Maybe even if you're not in education. So a reminder there to our listeners as well. All right, Dr. Bracht. So shifting gears a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the things we also like to talk about is just the leadership well-being and how we take care of ourselves. So serving as a leader is demanding. How do you maintain your personal balance and well-being while leading and supporting others? What does Dr. Brock do?
I have a vivid memory of when I shifted into knowing that I needed to do something to take care of myself. And whenever we did not come back to school after spring break because of the pandemic, that I knew that things were changing, and I was going to need to do something to really cope with uncharted territory. Something that you would never imagine is kids not coming back to school for fourth quarter. And so even though I had been what I would call kind of a casual runner, every once in a while, once a year, I might do a half marathon, train for 3 months, and then that was it. I think when we didn't return to school for fourth quarter, I went and bought a new pair of running shoes, and I'm like, I think I'm going to be running every day. I think I'm going to start doing some things that get my mind off of either the work or just give me, peace for an hour, hour and a half where I can shut everything down. So for me personally, that has been what I've kept up with, since 2020 is, I don't need to be training for, a half marathon to enjoy running or enjoy getting out. And even if and obviously because we were navigating not being at work, even if it wasn't running, just getting out and walking or, doing something outside and just enjoying getting your mind off of, work or anything else. And so for me, that's been a priority that whatever my day looks like or whatever I'm doing, I want to prioritize. How do I step away? And for me, running, walking is how I do that. Um,
Good
Good.
stuff. I always, we get in the thick of things, and sometimes it just feels like it's so overwhelming. And what I try to encourage young leaders is anything that just breaks it for a little bit. It is amazing when you go back to it, it doesn't seem as daunting. The challenge is still the same. Nothing changed except your perspective. You got a chance to step away, do something to re-energize, and it just never seems to be as daunting when you go back to it.
Yeah, and for me personally, sometimes even though I am trying to step away, even though I am doing something active, sometimes you're thinking about work. Um, but that's okay. Maybe there's something you're trying to work out in your
Yeah.
head. And you're like, I'm instead of doing it in my office behind a computer or a screen, I'm kind of working it out in a way that's, it low risk. I'm not presenting anything to anyone. I'm just trying to work it out in my head. I'm kind of really talking it through with myself almost while I'm being active. I think that's a piece of it. And obviously, those things, doing that for me personally that's not stressful when there's something important that I'm kind of trying to work through, but I'm also doing it in a way that, the setting is different. It can also be helpful, as you mentioned, to kind of step away, but then also, get things worked out.
Nathan's our brain guy, but I'm gonna suggest that there's probably something to be said about endorphins are probably kicking
Yeah,
in a little more when you're running than when you're sitting behind your desk.
that's
Hey, I was chomping at the bit to say something like, hey, that's not just a strategy. That's, if you're doing it in the morning and you're talking about your circadian cycles and you're getting that sun on you, the vitamin D and the deficiencies that we tend to, especially in America, have, and then you're putting your brain in a different state so you can solve those problems. Oh, that's good stuff, Dr. Brock.
I would also say that, things that we do, and it may seem small, but I can tell you we've got over 100 staff members participating, also trying to bring to our strategic plan, what are we doing for our staff mental health and wellness? And so I kind of charged our human resources director with let's get some friendly competitions going. Let's get something going where it gives people an incentive to, hey, for the next month or next 2 months, we're doing a challenge that everyone can do. It's an activity challenge, doesn't have to be running. And so how do we package that in a fun way? So everyone's in an app, depending on how many steps you got, we're traveling across the country and here's stops along the way. You made it to this place. So, and then also everyone likes some prizes, right? So, if you're participating, you might get a prize. And so we enter names for drawings at the end. And that's really been a way to try to engage more staff with just doing something active that hopefully it gets their mind off of, work. It's something that even when they are at work, they're getting some steps in. They're like, hey, look at this. I've got, today was a really active day. I got X amount of steps in while I was working. It just makes them part of kind of that community of people who've decided that they want to try, and it's very accessible for everyone. So I mentioned that too, because that wasn't dumb luck. That wasn't, well, we just accidentally did that. And it was like, no, it was intentional. It's part of our strategic plan. And I know that I didn't have the time to do it. So I entrusted someone else to do that. And they were more than happy to do it. They're like, I would love to take that on and really get that organized for all of our staff that want to be part of it.
Well, your focus on well-being there, and Jim and I would talk about that. Like, we want people to be happy in our workplace, but what if we can try to design systems where people get joy in their workplace, and what your focus on well-being there, and they can be successful knowing that our jobs are hard and there's going to be low days, but now, they've got things in where maybe there's fewer low days, they can get past that. And then the even better benefit is they can go home and be the spouses and parents and everything they need to be at home as well when we focus on that well-being.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
kudos to you once again.
Yeah.
All
So
right, go
yeah,
ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, if we kind of leave it each week with one piece of advice that you would give to a young leader just coming into, doesn't have to be the superintendency, but their first leadership role. What's one parting piece of advice?
I would just say, it's cliche, but do just as much listening as you do talking. Um, and don't be afraid of, kind of the silence, or don't be afraid of the pause. And you don't have to have the answer all the time within 5 seconds. You're going to get a lot of questions. People are going to ask you, and it is okay to say, well, what do you think? And I'd like to listen a little bit about what what do we already know collectively about a particular topic, and just get whatever you can do to get people talking about what they know, or maybe what they think they know to be true, and then mesh that with what you know as far as best practice, what you know as far as strategies that work, because ultimately you can't just read a strategy in a book and plug it into your district. You've got to think about the various conditions and approaches that are going to be right for you. And that's where that listening part comes in. You get to know what's going to be right for your people, your staff, your students, but it is rooted in. That's why the superintendent job is important. You are able to use your network and use your knowledge to understand what best practices are, and how do you take what you're hearing and wrap that into a best practice strategy so that everyone feels like they're part of it, and it's not just you telling people what's going to be successful and how it's going to go. You've done equal amounts of listening.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we appreciate you being here with us today. I mean, I'm just sharing your journey and the work you're doing in Afton. It's obvious you're committed to your students, to your community, um, and just a powerful example of continued leadership and what it looks like to build out a district. So we really appreciate you Appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. And, anytime I get to talk about Afton, I get excited. So I'll never pass up an opportunity to talk about what's going on in Afton because it gets me excited, gets me rejuvenated as well. So I appreciate
Yeah,
the invitation.
it's exciting. You'll have a platform now this year to ask the superintendent of the year. You can brag on your district uh,
Mm.
in a lot of
One, one,
places.
100%. That's the thing I always say is that, even though I guess technically that's an individual recognition, I'm only accepting this on behalf of, the staff, the community, the students in AF, as it takes them, to anything you do that I guess is noteworthy of being recognized. It's because, people have put their trust in you. They've allowed conditions to happen where a lot of great things can happen. So I always make sure that people realize the Afton will always be attached to this honor, 100%.
Nathan, anything before I bring us to a close?
Nope, I would just echo those same things. I'm proud to have you, not only representing Afton, but going out there and talking about the right work for Missouri and others. So appreciate it very much, Dr. Brock.
Thank you.
For our listeners, we hope this conversation inspires you to think about the skills and experiences your graduates need and how systems like Portrait of a Grad and competency-based learning can move those visions into real practice. If your district needs sustained leadership coaching, you need somebody to help you with your leaders in implementing change, teacher professional development, competency-based learning, any of those things, Nathan and I'd be happy to visit with you about how Lifted can partner with you in that work. Until next time, be well and keep leading with purpose beyond the bell.